nobody even fathomed the strength of this hurricane.
Unbelievable! We evacuated that night when the water was up to my chest.
Nobody ever wants to go through what we went through. We lost 1,800 people, and it was an awful event.
Every public and private school, every public building, and every church in this town was either totally destroyed or unusable.
I mean, it's literally like an A-bomb had been dropped.
It was just hard to imagine what you saw in the aftermath in 21st century America.
On August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina roared on shore, devastating communities from Grand Isle, Louisiana to Mobile, Alabama. It took courage and creativity for the elected officials at the helm to plot a course to recovery from the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. These are their lessons learned and advice for other leaders who may someday grapple with nature's worst.
What we learned was that the city wasn't as prepared as it should have been immediately. Like what happens when something hits you and what are you going to do for the next 72 to 48 hours after that? But really more importantly, that the city wasn't what we now call resilient. It wasn't strong enough in all of its iterations.
I've traveled the U.S. and other countries, and many of them don't have a plan. So first thing you got to do is make sure they have a plan. And you don't have to, spend months on developing the plan, but you want to first off is make sure you have continuity of government. If the government fails or any structure in that government fails, then you will have pretty much a chaos on the ground.
That I realized that we had no backup communication system. So one of the first things we did was to have kind of like a walkie-talkie, but we set it up on a separate remote on a tall antenna at our football stadium. And that really was the thing that enabled us to maintain communication with each other and with our different department heads on a different channel than our emergency personnel, whereas other cities were just scattered everywhere.
For the first 3 days or longer, you better be prepared to take care of yourself. No matter under the best of circumstances, you're going to have to take care of yourself and your people for 3 days. Be prepared to do that.
You have to have water, and a close second behind that would be ice. You need to have sustenance prepared to distribute. MREs are the easy and best way to do that. So you have to have staging areas dispersed in specific ways within the community. You find large parking lots that are on corners, and then you have personnel, they load it into the cars and load it out. It sounds easier than it is when you have damage and debris all over the place. So it's a good idea ahead of time to find the right areas.
We set up a situation where we, every year, would have emergency contracts executed before hurricane season, whereby we would force the contractors to make preparations that they would need to have the manpower, the supplies and everything to respond to a disaster. And we'd have these contracts in place that would be triggered when an emergency or natural event occurred.
Your past records are extremely important. They asked me for records, maintenance records. I said, well, they were underwater for about 7 days. I'm not sure there's going to be anything there for you to read. So, if you have a storm approaching and it looks like you're going to take a big hit, take all your historical records and put them on the second story, put them in the back of a U-Haul, and take them out of town heading off. And when the storm passes, bring them back. Evacuate, evacuate, evacuate. We would have most probably lost a couple of hundred people, and we didn't lose one.
Never want to evacuate your people at nighttime. Give them that extra 8 hours, that 16 hours, and let them take their time to get out.
Then we had, of course, our Coast Transit Authority had an evacuation bus. We would go pick up anyone. So that's important. How are you going to get people out, especially those that are vulnerable or don't have transportation?
The problem is we can't force people to evacuate. We can put a mandatory evacuation in. We still can't force anybody to leave.
In one particular case, one of our firefighters told them the very thing. If you're not going to leave, it's an apartment complex. He said, if you're not going to leave, put your name and social security number on it so we can identify your body. And they scoffed that and laughed. And the next day, in the afternoon, I said, go down and look for those people. And I was advised, no, they left. They evacuated. And I said, they did. I said, what happened? He said, I told them that 90% of the time when we find a body, a storm victim said they're naked. And they said that was this lady who was apartment manager's red button, and she got them all out because she was not going to be found without her clothes on. So it worked.
The first thing you got to do is just come out of being shell-shocked. I tell you, take it one day at a time. One day at a time. The pace that we were going is what kept us all sane, because had we just stopped, I don't know, everybody might have just packed up and left. It was that bad.
You have to figure out what do you need to do once that storm passes and you've got damage and you've got people out there. Once you determine what your major missions are going to be, then that's your checklist. And then you take your people and the equipment necessary and assign them to each one of those missions and let them go do their thing.
Disseminating information after a major natural disaster is something that is extremely important, because people are lost. They're looking for direction, and they're looking to feel safe, quite frankly, that somebody's looking after them. You can do that by setting these pods up, and I tell you, churches are a great place to do it because it's a place that people are going to kind of congregate to anyway.
One thing that you have to do is to secure a place that's high and dry, that's large enough to have all of the agencies who come in, the Small Business Administration, MEMA and FEMA, the American Red Cross. You have to have space for those agencies to come in to help. So first of all, you have to think about, how am I going to help the helpers? So we had a vacant former Kmart space that we were able to contact the owners, and we were able to get in, had our building inspectors there, turned on all the air conditioning, all the power, made sure we had a generator there. So we became the hub for people all over the county and the coast to come to get whatever help that they needed.
When you have an event like Katrina, unfortunately, we have citizens in our community that are drug addicted, and typically they get, of course, they get their drugs through illegal sources. And what happened in Gulfport, and it happened along the entire coastline of Mississippi, all of the drugs became unavailable at the same time. What made me aware of it was a call from one of the local hospitals that there appeared to be people circling the hospital in automobiles, and they were afraid that they were going to charge the doors of the hospitals and go into the rooms in the hospitals where they store the drugs. And so we had to put guards at the hospital to prevent that from happening.
Our civil defense director at Harrison County, he suggested, he's a retired general, and he said, I don't know how to keep people from going across the tracks, looting, and getting hurt, because they don't need to be down there with natural gas blowing out where a house broke off and a pipe's still blowing, you're going to blow it up. He said, I don't know what else to do. He said, I had somebody tell me that concertina wire might, and everybody except Biloxi put it down.
We had no supplies, no nothing for the 1,200 people that were sitting out at the high school gym. We started going from business to business. We had a Winn-Dixie at the time. We had CVS drugstores. We had Walmart down in Waveland. We started going in those buildings and grabbing anything that we could possibly get that was salvageable for supplies, whether it was water, drinks, chips, snacks, crackers, anything that we could salvage to give to the people to last until the other folks came in.
We raided every restaurant and grocery store around. There was no one there. The meat was going bad, vegetables were going bad. We ate great, but every time we went, We told them how many steaks we took, how many things of meat.
You see this beautiful park we're sitting in? This beautiful park we're sitting in was a debris site where we dumped all the debris after the hurricane, because this is one of the few places we could, much to the consternation of our citizens. But it's come back, and you can see it's beautiful and better than ever.
You had the church groups when they came to town, wonderful people, did a tremendous amount of work. They would show up in town here to help, and you have 100 volunteers. Where are they going to stay? Where are you going to put them? There's no restrooms, there's no water. They brought a lot with them. So we had to do a better job on coordinating all of our volunteer resources and cleared those through our offices where they would make direct contact.
You can get a tractor trailer load of items, and if you don't have an organized place to put it, you're going to lose it, and it's going to just be junk in a pile, and you won't know where to go get it when somebody needs it. So it was very important to have it come in and be organized, where it is, who brought it, your plans of what you're doing with it. It needs to have organization, or it could just been a mess.
What quickly became evident that was the best and easiest aid to distribute was gift cards. So we would, when we were asked, we would say, if you want to give something, please don't send us cash. That creates problems in itself. Go to any store that you like that you think we might need help from, and it could be Toys R Us or any type of a convenience store, pharmacy, big box store, whatever, and just send gift cards, and so then you can pass those out in monetary amounts. It made it very easy.
We're the Killer Shark Band from Waveland, Mississippi. We lost our houses and everything, but we have our friends and our families. For that, we're very thankful.
You want everybody back, and you don't want to have this instance that we can go forward without everybody. You want everybody there, so you got to be an inviting city. Secondly, they have to have the ability to come back, so you have to restore, basically, basic things like healthcare, education, roads and bridges, public safety, all kinds of those things.
In our particular case, FEMA moved in with the trailers. Should we go and build a park and put them all in some kind of a park, then they're 10 or 15 miles away. Some are seniors, some are elderly, some are young, some are widows. You have all kinds, and we thought it'd be better to put the trailer in his front yard, let him rebuild his house, and it will help restart our community. So that's what we did. I think I put in 15,000 trailers or something and that took months. That took months and months and months.
You've got to fight the battle with them and for them to give them the opportunity to come back. And that means fighting the FEMA battles on the new flood requirements, elevation requirements, fight the insurance companies with them to say, hey, if our folks don't get reimbursed on the insurance, they can't afford to come back.
If you don't get your residents back within 5 years, then the chances are they're going to get, they're going to start going to school, and they're going to get settled, and they're going to build new lives, and you won't get those people back. We have lost a lot of wonderful, wonderful people, and it breaks my heart to look at empty lots and slabs today and remember those families.
We have a tiered approach to having businesses come back. We have tier 1, 2, and 3, and then they can apply, and we encourage them to apply before hurricane season. It's a 2-year permit, and then they can renew it online so that they have those placards to come in ahead of time. So we tier it so that we bring the most significant and important ones back in terms of recovery first. We figured it out based on what we need. So first responders come back, we have banks come back, we have grocery stores come back. Those are the entities that we need so that when people come back, they can conduct their daily business activities and help us recover. So we now have a tiered system that's put into place ahead of time.
I think it's just important to have one-on-one contact. I made it a point, and so did all the aldermen, to be very visible to the businesses. We were there, both the highway and downtown, making sure people had what they need or for cleanup. The banks were open. There were There were emergency funds and grants that FEMA came through, so communication was key, but that's what we could do, at least for the businesses. And then afterwards, we had facade grants that we were able to leverage, competitive grants for people to fix up their facade or new stucco or awnings, signage, lighting. So a lot of them came back better than ever.
Anybody that had anything to do with businesses, get them involved and have a one-stop shop where businesses could go to, and if they needed loans, if there was any grant possibilities, whatever it ended up being, they could go to one place and get all of the information they needed and hopefully help them get back on their feet a lot faster than if they had to do it on their own. And it worked out real well. Chamber came in and got involved in it with the housing programs and some of the other grant programs for the businesses, and it really worked well.
What we've learned in New Orleans is that if everybody can come to the table and hope for opportunity, but take responsibility to say that I am a part of the community, I'm not just for shareholders, but I can't live apart from the community. I've got to give back. I've got to invest my time and my money and my employees' efforts. I've got to invest our resources to make the community better, and then I have to be there philanthropically as well. I'm going to learn as much from them, as they're getting from us. And that has been a real blessing. Our business community has really stepped up to the plate, and they have understood now that we're one community.
Everybody had a plan. It was just urban planners and architects on steroids. And so we had our local architects and planners, as well as these experts from all over the country. They mapped our village. They measured it. They measured the streets. They looked at the fabric that we had, our urban fabric, and they said, okay, what do you really want? Now's your chance. It's once in a lifetime. How do you rebuild? But you have to have a picture with the end in mind. How do you want to build? More beautifully, more resiliently, more walkable.
The thing that the people of the city of New Orleans did that I think was quite amazing and miraculous was they actually had the courage to look at themselves and say, you know what, we're not going to put it back like it was. As great a city as we were, what our job now is to keep those things that we had that were great and to discard those things that were not. And so what we began to do in the city is look at where those deficiencies were. How can we actually, when we build back, when you build a school, when you build the levee system, build it back stronger and build it back right?
You've got to give them at least one, better is some, very visible emblems of recovery, something at an intersection where people see that's great, so that they see it on a regular basis when they pass it. Gives them hope, they see progress. And so you need to put those visible signs of progress in the most visible areas first.
And there's no question to me, yeah, you build back. You don't cut and run, you build back. You just build back a little stronger.
We have a lot of houses now that's really raised. You just can't tell people you got to leave. You can't live here anymore. Well, there was some buyouts. In fact, there were quite a few. But you buy it out, and then that becomes vacant property forever, allegedly. So that's not necessarily a good thing for any city.
I think the hardest part is to explain it to the public. Public is under the opinion that FEMA is a blank check, and that's anything but.
Somewhere, way, shape, or form, you are going to have to legitimize what you did. And you're going to have to show why you did it. And my first suggestion is to get everything in writing that you possibly can.
We gave all of our fire departments and our first responders sheets for them to write on during Katrina. Write down what you're doing and the time you're spending on it. Because we discovered that through other storms, we needed that documentation. Hugely, it's a bureaucratic system, and it needs paperwork. It churns on paperwork.
You can't afford to be in a position where you're asking them what it is they can do for you. You have to kind of step forward and you say, I need these things, ding, 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 and check them off.
The things that certainly you deserve to get replaced or repaired, stick to your guns, stay with it, and present your case, stay with your argument if you're having trouble. And then when you start doing reimbursement things, invoices and all, make 6 of them, 6 copies. because each individual that comes in every couple months, they replace each other, and none of them have any of those records.
We brought a company in that was extremely fluent in Feminese, all right? And that assisted us a great deal because none of my staff, and I had lawyers, I had accountants, CPAs, none of them had really dealt with FEMA to this extent before. I lost 32 city buildings here. How do you start putting that back together?
You want to do the right thing, you want to lift up things. FEMA only gives you money to replace. For instance, my gas line was built in 1959. They wanted me to find the same guy that designed that tank in 1959. You have to get a little frustrated with them, and you learn as you go, and tell them you want a new, improved project, and it blows their mind. It's something that took me quite a few years to learn.
Or there's another one called an alternate project, where you say, this is a project here, how much do you say I got coming from this? And then you say, well, we don't want to build that. Can we take part of that and go do something else? And you get 70% of that. But it doesn't get okayed today, tonight, tomorrow. That's papers going back and forth, getting approval up to Atlanta to regional. And it's as tough as the NFL playbook, I promise you that.
It can get frustrating, and people will say, well, we'll go ahead and take out a bond. And I've seen this happen over and over again. We'll take out a bond, we'll pay for it, and we'll deal with FEMA later. That is the worst possible road to go down, because once you do the work, chances are they are not going to approve it. It has to be done to their specifications and their guidelines.
Don't build any more than what you need. Kind of like we said that, the Taj Mahal may look nice, but somewhere along the road, there's not going to be any grant monies to pay for the maintenance of it or the insurance on it, and you're going to have to do that with your local funds, and it's not cheap.
They need to be ready for a sustained approach. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. They need to manage expectations with their constituency. They need to have the constituency be part of that team approach. Be open and transparent about what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, and have everyone buy into that.
Recovery, I always said that there's really no difference between response and recovery, because it all really is very closely related. There's no day you wake up and say, okay, now we're in recovery. Because we were picking up debris in these canals and our highways for 10 months later.
It's a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly mission for recovery. It's not a snap of the finger, and it's not going to happen right away. You just have to just grind it out and know that, hope you make progress every month and every year, that you're getting better. And it's just a long-term effort.
As we sit today in 2016, they are still initiating and working funding and grants that I received from Katrina. So it's not a quick process.
Do what you can to minimize any future impacts, whether it's with, like we did here with the Corps of Engineers and rebuilt the seawall, built it higher, stronger, better than what it was before, new building codes that hopefully will at least minimize, if not eliminate, some of the wind damage that we had during Katrina.
You need to ask yourself, you got to do a really deep dive, and this is hard for communities to do. You got to look at yourself in the mirror, and you got to see all the wrinkles, and you got to see the cracks, and you just can't see the beautiful, princess or the king. You got to go see what is, and then say, we have vulnerabilities, and do stress tests in your community about where your stresses are. And then you have to do the hard thing, which is to put new rules, new regulations, create new partnerships with the private sector, and everybody decide that they're going to do something that you're not required to do because the wolf's not at the doorstep yet, but the wolf is coming.
So now we have rebuilt with the idea of a storm in the future. Everything that we've done, even the beachfront, even this pier, you can see the fortifications of the concrete versus regular wooden poles. This in Hurricane Isaac, and several years ago, this was all 3 feet underwater, and we didn't lose a board.
But the way to try to minimize the damage is to invest in our infrastructure and invest in our protection. And that makes sense not only from a humanitarian standpoint, but from an economic standpoint. Because if you protect it, then the American taxpayer would have to come up with less money on the back end to rebuild again.
Highway 90 unites us right there, and it's the road that defines the Gulf Coast.
Everything we have is better than we had before. We just don't have as much of it. And some of the things we lost, we had the oldest city-owned library in the United States. You had the second largest collection of the antebellum homes. They had enough money to get that back. You can build something like it, but you can't get that back. New infrastructure's in there, new city halls, new police station, one new fire station. We got rehab because it wasn't damaged enough. So the other cities have stuff too. They got better stuff than they had before. It's built better than it was before, and so that will come with any disaster like that happens.
From the standpoint of the city infrastructure, the city buildings, it's absolutely better.
Much better. No more shingle roofs. You have steel roofs, galvanized roofs on all the homes.
The mantra that we used was if we build back exactly like we were before the storm, we would have failed. We're going to make it better than it was, better than it's ever been, and it's going to be magnificent. This park is far superior to anything that it ever looked like before the storm. It's the largest publicly accessible municipal park on the northern Gulf of Mexico. It's quite a place. But is it worth the loss of people's lives? No, it's not.
If we haven't learned anything, expect the unexpected. You know, that's what you got to prepare for. You'll get beat up after a storm or a natural disaster if you're not prepared and you let your community down. You'll never get beat up for being too prepared.
Better think out the box. You better be prepared to do things that nobody has ever had to do before.
I've heard elected officials around, well, I'm not real sure why we have an emergency department. We've never had an emergency. I say, yeah, but you have one. And when the media comes to you and ask you, because they're sharp, and they come and they ask you, what's going on, what happened, any deaths, what are you doing, what about recovery, and you don't have an answer, you may not be reelected.
You can't stop bad things from happening, but you can be better prepared. You can really think about what this means, and then you can go through every iteration of your community, private sector, not-for-profit, government, and think about ways you can be stronger so that when the thing comes, the water rising, the winds blowing, the terrorist attack surprising you, that you can, number one, withstand more easily what it is that they're bringing you, the death and the destruction, and you can recover faster. That's what resilience essentially is about, and we just got to work at it. We've really never thought much about it in the world, but we're getting better at it now. And that is not to say that people should be scared. You should just be ready.
The lesson of Hurricane Katrina is, for the rest of the country, is we're all vulnerable to natural disasters. You know, if you live in the Midwest, it may not be a hurricane, but it could be a tornado, it could be a major storm with hail. You live in California, it could be mudslides, wildfires. You live near a river, Colorado flooded. You know, even though Colorado has mountains, West Virginia flooded. So every part of this country, every part of this world is susceptible to a natural disaster. But when that occurs, everybody has to band together to help rebuild that community, because every community is worth rebuilding.